All right, stand by. 10 seconds.
Camera one.
Count.
Ready, camera
Roll
two.
for record.
2,
One.
1, roll for record.
It was pool party pandemonium. I'm John Phillips, and this is the rundown. McKinney, Texas Police Corporal Eric Casabo has resigned after video of him roughly treating a bikini-clad black teenage girl went viral. Let's go ahead and take a look.
Yo, Jumper, what the is going on? Why is he acting so crazy?
Activists went nuts after the video surfaced, decrying this as an example of police racism. The local police chief was quick to throw his officer under the bus, saying that Casebolt's actions were, quote, indefensible, and he was, quote, out of control. The host of the pool party is fueling the racial animus with claims that a white neighbor sparked the brouhaha after hurling racial epithets at her guests, telling them to, quote, go back to your Section 8 home. But residents of the neighborhood, many of whom are black, are saying this had nothing to do with race. It's not a public pool. It's a pool for residents only. And the host of the party broke the rules by inviting too many guests at once who were out of control, resulting in the call to the cops in the first place. All of this, of course, was exacerbated by the fact that the teens were clearly not complying with officers when the officers were called. But Corporal Casebolt was also not behaving in a very professional way, running back and forth, grabbing people seemingly at random, cursing up a blue streak, almost like Steven Cruiser here, waving his gun around. So was the officer overly rough, or were the teens to blame for breaking the rules, getting into fights, not obeying orders, that sort of thing? Or does everyone have a pox on all their houses? We turn to our very own Scott Ott, who was on the scene in McKinney, Texas, to get the real story. Scott, what did you learn?
Well, I'm not sure anybody can give you the real story, although I have heard that they're renaming this subdivision Donnybrook. It's just a suggestion. I went to a protest rally the other night at a local elementary school just up the street from where the swimming pool was. It was organized by somebody from out of town, down around the eastern side of Dallas, and so I made a point to wander around with a camera and talk to people who are actually from McKinney and get their impression. When you hear the major or see the major media coverage of this rally, you get the sense that it was very intense and people were very upset, and there was a lot of shouting through megaphones and shouting into each other's faces. But when you're actually there and wandering around, you see that that's a very small part of it. For the most part, there were folks who were concerned, and they had legitimate concerns. I want to show you a little piece of the video that we shot. We're going to have a fuller version of it up at PJ TV and on our PJ Media YouTube channel. But this video shows two different examples. One, a woman named Deborah Long, who I spoke with, who said she doesn't normally come to protests, and she's followed by a guy named Robert W. Drakes III, who looks like he does frequently come to protests. Take a look.
Even though, we had one cop that I feel like went rogue, we really have a good police department. And I don't want that one cop and his issues to actually be the last voice. Because the people, the police department here, they've been really, to me, they've been really kind, considerate, and then they really look out for their people. I think that, reform, we should have reform, but I want them to not cover our whole department, the whole police department like zipper, though they're bad.
Here's the thing, the justice system was present. The justice system was violent. The justice system wasn't peaceful. You saw what we saw, but you were afraid, most people in the media, to admit what they saw. You know what they say? We need a full investigation. No, we need to talk about what we saw. We need to be truthful. We need to tell the truth. How do we deal with the justice system? Is we tell the truth. That's what we do. We actually say that we saw what we saw. People are tired. People have seen. You don't have to have a judge to talk about what was seen.
So you can hear in that video my little voice continually trying to ask a question, and all I wanted to know was basically how can two sets of people look at the same video and draw completely different conclusions? Because right next to him was another guy who was shouting that the police did absolutely the right thing. Over and over, I asked McKinney residents, what was it about what you saw on that video that led you to believe there was a racial element to this encounter. And over, what they said was that police officer, Corporal Casebolt, was only telling the black kids to get on the ground, that there were some other white people in the area, but he didn't tell them to get on the ground. He only told the black kids to get on the ground. And then they took it from there, and they sort of made the leap to say, you know that this kind of thing is happening with police across the country. And so that connection with what they've seen on TV led to that next step where they said, obviously, it must be a racial incident.
I'll tell you what it looks like to me when I look at this video, and I've seen it any number of times now, and you see the way the cop behaved. All the other cops seem to be doing what they were supposed to be doing. This cop looked like he was having a bad day. It was hot in Texas. There were teenagers running around everywhere, and he didn't want to have to chase after them. And if you look, they're going to show it here in a second. He pulls the gun out. No one's pulled a gun on him at this point, and he's just waving it around. That's like Barney Fife sort of thing. Your thoughts?
Well, I think one of the most telling things in that video there is when the other cops show up, the first thing they do is grab him.
Yes.
And like take it down a notch, which he then doesn't do. And I think this is the problem. The first woman in Scott's video hits the nail on the head. This is one of those things where the outside agitators, a big problem in all of these things. Every time there's always somebody coming in from the outside to stir things up. But the big problem is they want to take the actions of one cop who was not doing what he should have been doing at that time, or wasn't doing it well, or was having a bad day, and they want to paint all law enforcement. In the case of the second guy in Scott's video, wants to paint the entire justice system. This one cop is not the entire justice system. He's this one cop, and you could, that's the danger here now, is that they want to turn it into yet the summer of police citizen riot. They want it to fit this overall agitation narrative when this guy was a problem into and of himself.
And we need to point out, too, no one was killed.
Yeah.
No one was even injured. No one was hospitalized after this incident took place. So it's bad-looking video, and it's a cop clearly losing his temper. But I think there's another issue at play here, Scott, and I'd like to go to you on this. To me, all of this would have been avoided if these teenagers, if these kids would have just listened to the police officer's instructions. If a cop comes and tells you to do something and you don't do it, I can almost assure you that you're not going to like the result. If they would have just listened to the cops, this would have been a very easy thing. The cops deal with this all the time. It would have just gone away, no big deal.
You know, every once in a while you hear a news story where they say, well, somebody was injured in a robbery gone bad. And I always think, well, isn't a robbery already bad? This is one of those situations where this was a bad thing gone bad, if that were possible. You know, if for people who don't live in a subdivision like this, I live in a similar kinds of subdivision. There's a pool that is owned by the homeowners association. There are very strict rules about access to that pool, and you can only take a couple of guests with you, even if you live in the neighborhood. You don't stage giant parties there. If you wanted to have a big party, you'd have to have permission from the homeowners association. Essentially, they'd have to vote on it. But that didn't happen in this case. And so somebody scheduled a party and not only sent out invitations to friends, but posted posters about it on Instagram and other social media. The party was referred to as a dime piece cookout, which is a kind of slang piece refers to a woman's body, or at least a portion of it, and dime is another way of saying 10. So you're inviting a bunch of teenagers to something that is sort of an overtly sexualized event where they had a DJ, where they implied you'd be able to swim in the pool, when in fact you couldn't swim in the pool. So when the police show up, there's already chaos. There's a fight among two women who are pulling each other's hair and punching at each other. And if you watch the video, I think where Officer Casebolt really got angry was when he started running after these kids who didn't obey what he told them to do, and he fell down. And he does this beautiful roll when he hits the ground and he comes right back up. But
Charlie's Angels.
But he got hurt. He got hurt when he fell down. If anybody got hurt, it was him. And I think at that point, that set him off. And from then, he just lost his judgment.
I'd like to say something to your point there, too, because I'm going to go out on a limb and say I probably got in more trouble as a kid than either you or Scott did. And I used to be involved in these big teenage events where we were doing things we shouldn't have been doing, underage drinking. There were huge groups of us. And the thing we always knew, when the cops show up, just shut up. And then the cops will just tell you, go do this somewhere else. I just don't want to see this. I don't want to deal with it. You just shut up and do what the cops tell you to do and get out of there. And that happened a lot lot when I was a kid. There'd be 200 of us getting in trouble, and these sheriffs would show up in the middle of the desert, and they would go, I don't want to see this, go somewhere else. And we would go, yes, officer. And we got out, and nobody got beat up, and nobody got manhandled.
How much are the activists to blame for this? Because the activists, whenever you see them on television, the second guy that Scott that you talked to, I would throw him in that category. They just assume. It's the starting point of negotiations are, you break the rules, you don't listen to the cops, and then it's on everyone else to make sure that the situation ends in a peaceful manner. If they continue to go on TV and push this narrative, they're going to continue to see problems in the very neighborhoods that they live in and they claim to represent, aren't they?
Well, yeah, and I think they've created, one of the guys who I interviewed who's a McKinney resident who's lived there a long time, who told me that some of his friends he graduated with are on the police force and they love that community. He didn't like what he saw in the video, but he said, you know, when these outside people come in and create an incendiary situation with their mouths and then say they want peace, he doesn't buy it. And he said, now, you know, I talked to another guy who's a pastor, a guy named Derek Golden, who's a pastor of the wonderfully named Amazing Church of McKinney. That's the name of the church. And he said, you know, all these cameras and all these people are going to be gone in a couple of weeks, and we're going to have to live with the consequences. And so Pastor Golden was doing everything he could to bring people together and to create dialogue. I talked to a police sergeant named Sherwood Holmes, an awesome name for a police sergeant. And Sherwood Holmes told me he's been here for years. This is a highly unusual event. And he said, McKinney is the best place to live in America, and we're going to keep it that way. This community is going to come together.
Did you talk to the homeowner?
Which homeowner?
The homeowner of the organizer of the party, I guess I should say.
Yes, I did talk to the organizer of the party, or if you could call it a conversation. I kept asking her questions, and she kept telling me that her attorney had told her that she couldn't say anything. And then one of her friends sort of, I don't think she intended to say this out loud, she said, so she doesn't incriminate herself.
Oops. These outside agitators are the worst. They want the violence right now. They were responsible for everything bad that happened in Ferguson. They were responsible for everything bad that happened in Baltimore. And this has been going on since the Occupy thing. The left astroturfs everything. They have professional agitators that they dispatch all over America as needed for these kinds of things. I would go to these Occupy camps and meet the people who were there to organize. That's the problem. They want to advance something like this guy that kept shouting Scott down in that thing. It was the justice system, the justice system. No, it was Officer Badmood. It was not the justice. Yes. So they're the worst, and you can't do anything about it right now. But the more people can understand that what's happening, and then what they're getting to the press to say what's happening, because that's it. They get them there right away to start to make it seem like it's a bigger deal than it actually is.
All right, that's all the time we have for today, but now it's your turn. Is this party pandemonium an example of police racism, or are the cops just doing their job trying to keep law and order? Tell us what you think in the comments section below. I'm John Phillips. Thanks so much for watching The Rundown.